Gordon Brown leads Labour to its worst local election result for 40 years. They lose hundreds of council seats and they're pushed into third place behind the Liberal Democrats. Jubilation for David Cameron's Conservatives. They take a massive 44% of the vote across England and Wales.
I think these results are not just a vote against Gordon Brown and his government. I think they're a vote of positive confidence in the Conservative Party.
It's clear to me that this has been a disappointing night, indeed a bad night for Labour. We have lessons to learn from that, and then we will move forward.
In the race for London Mayor, still no result, but all the parties agree it is looking good for Boris Johnson. The declaration should come before midnight. There's apparently been a high turnout throughout London.
Also tonight, 2 men are jailed for a gay sex blackmail plot against a member of the royal family. Robert Mugabe vows to fight on as Zimbabwe's presidential election results are announced at last. And light at the end of the tunnel. Street artist Banksy puts on a show and invites us all to join in.
And later in the hour, I'll have all the sport, including Avram Grant is confident his future's with Chelsea after guiding the Blues to the Champions League final in Moscow.
Good evening from London City Hall, where Labour is bracing itself for bad news in the election for Mayor of London. The latest signals from all the parties, by the way, are that Boris Johnson, the Conservative, is poised to end the long reign of Labour's Ken Livingstone, but we are still waiting for the formal declaration to see if those signals are accurate. What we do have are the local election results across England and Wales, and it is now clear that Gordon Brown has led Labour to its worst local result for 40 years. It's been a triumph for David Cameron's Conservatives. They have an extra 256 seats on local councils. Labour have ended up with 331 fewer councillors, and the Lib Dems have gained 34 seats. The share of the vote is more stark. The Conservatives took 44% of the votes cast. Labour were way behind on 24%, forced into third place by the Lib Dems, who won 25%. As our political editor, Nick Robinson, now reports.
Boris, the Mayor of London. What a joke, they scoffed. Well, tonight the Tories appear to be having the last laugh. The counting's gone on much longer than expected because far more people voted than expected, which was good news for the man who's rallied the militant suburbs of London.
It's been very good at the local elections, but I'm waiting to see what happens in London.
The era of Ken may soon be at an end. He won for the first time despite the Labour Party. He may now have lost because of them. If the Conservatives do win London tonight, it will be their biggest election victory since John Major's in 1992. And it will come on a day when David Cameron's Conservatives have done as well as Tony Blair did just before he became Prime Minister. Tory victories, Labour losses. The story was the same, whether in the north, the south, the Midlands or in Wales. In Bury and Plymouth, Nuneaton and the Vale of Glamorgan, the Conservatives are now in charge.
It's clear to me that this has been a disappointing night, indeed a bad night for Labour. We have lessons to learn from that, and then we will move forward. My job is to listen and to lead, and that is what I will do.
And welcome to election night, with results already.
Faced with a long and miserable night, ministers though search for the odd crumb of comfort.
We've done quite well. So
Just watch the reaction of a fellow Labour MP who couldn't quite believe what he was hearing.
Rank and file Labour Party activists and Labour MPs are saying the same thing as me. If we try and interpret it then that way, we sleepwalk towards a Tory government.
Criticism from the left, this from the right.
It's no secret that you are critical of Gordon Brown. Do you think you can win under him?
I think it's possible, but it would require changes. We have to set out our policy very clearly. He has to get a team which is right. We have to send our message and our purpose in a more convincing way than we have done so far.
The man who may just now be believing that he'll be our next Prime Minister toured the places he'd won, places that have not been Conservative for a long, long time.
I think this is a very big moment for the Conservative Party, but I don't want anyone to think that we would deserve to win an election just on the back of a failing government. I want us to really prove to people that we can make the changes that they want to see in terms of schools and hospitals and crime and the other issues that really matter to all of us.
There was relief for the Lib Dems' new leader, who had feared another year of losses. Gains from Labour in the north outweighed losses to the Tories in the south.
In Hull, in Sheffield, in Newcastle, in Liverpool, in Burnley, which we also won overnight, in so many of the great northern cities of this country, they're now being run by the Liberal Democrats. That is a total sea change in British politics.
Tonight, Gordon Brown left Downing Street knowing that, having promised to renew Labour, he'd in fact done worse than Tony Blair, even after the country had tired of him and his unsuccessful war. Nick Robinson, BBC News at London City Hall.
Well, as we've heard, some of Labour's biggest losses were in its heartlands, including South Wales and the north of England. In Wales, they lost the traditional strongholds of Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen, and in the northwest of England, for the first time in 22 years, the Conservatives gained control of Bury. So what drove the voters away from Labour? Our political correspondent, Laura Kuennsberg, has this assessment.
Gordon Brown's been urged to smile more in public. But just now, as maybe we're getting used to the sight, he might wonder if determinedly grinning has been worth it at all.
Would you recommend this job to anyone else? I say, not yet.
That was in the good times. Now laughter's turned to despair. Previous council defeats under Tony Blair pale into insignificance.
For 15 years, they never had any Tory councillors in Islington. Now, quite suddenly, they've got 47.
Not since the days of Harold Wilson. Another Labour PM not fond of the public glare has the party's vote fallen so far. 2 years after his 1968 meltdown, Wilson was out. But on top of doubts about whether Gordon Brown himself is right for the job, he's had to wrestle with real policy problems too. One very much of his own making.
Gordon Brown decided to abolish the 10p tax rate last year, but when it came into force last month, there was an outcry from his own MPs, angry that it left many of the poorest worse off. The PM changed his mind, but the damage was done. Record prices at the fuel pump have left many of us feeling worse off, and on top of that, the cost of many of our basics, even bread and butter, has soared. Gordon Brown built his record on looking after our wallets, but his reputation as well as the nation's finances is under attack.
Nowhere were the results more dramatic than in Wales. Labour lost 6 councils, even Blaenau Gwent, a drastic redrawing of the lines of power. Voters felt Labour hadn't been pulling its weight. Years-long loyalty was exhausted.
I think people are generally struggling now with the cost of living. I think it's getting out of proportion to what we earn.
There's a lot of people suffering, the working class people. So I think people just had enough of them now, they want to change.
Councils had caused a stink by giving up collecting the bins on a weekly basis. And there was anger about school closures too. But there was blame for the national leadership.
It doesn't matter whether you consider it to be Labour, i.e. Blair and Brown, or Labour, i.e. Blair for starting the war, Brown for the 10p tower. It doesn't matter really, does it?
Control slipped from Labour's grasp in Reading, and with it an emblem of the party's ability to win in the south.
The price of fuel's gone up, the price of food has gone up, the cost of living has gone up. They've got no control on immigration and such. It's just everything, really. I just wanted a change, I think.
Now, this guy that's in now, he just doesn't instill confidence in me. And, like, I'm running 3 different jobs just trying to keep afloat. That's why this time I said to myself, I'm not even leaving my house. Because it doesn't matter who's in, it doesn't get any better.
The Tories took seats from Labour in many parts of the north of England too, taking control of North Tyneside.
I think the public have lost confidence in the government over the last 12 months or so.
I didn't even vote yesterday.
Why not?
Oh, just disillusioned with everything, you know.
But would Labour's vote crumble like this Tyneside relic if it had been a Westminster election?
Well, if we simply take the results tonight and translate them directly into a general election, we would be looking at the Conservatives winning something like a parliamentary majority of 100 or so. So to that degree, at least, it's very good news for the Conservatives. We should bear in mind, though, that people don't necessarily vote in local elections in the way they would in a general election.
There's no other Labour figure trying to force their way into the PM's home for now.
Nice to meet you. What a pleasure to meet you. Can I come in?
Yes, of course. But there's already demand for a very different Gordon Brown to come calling for your vote next time round. Laura Kuennsberg, BBC News.
Well then, back here at London City Hall, let's get the latest on how the count is progressing in that race for Mayor of London. We were expecting a result before now, I have to say. We're going to join James Landale, who's monitoring the count for us. James, what's the latest?
Well, the latest here is that there is still a strong expectation that Boris Johnson is going to win. Why do I say that? Well, first of all, the information we're getting here on these screens, partial results coming in from the counts that tell us that in the 14 regions that London's been divided up into, Boris Johnson is ahead in around 8 of those regions, Ken Livingstone only in the 6. We also know, because this prediction, this expectation, is not being denied by the high commands in either Labour or in the Conservative Party. In fact, just within the last hour or so, Tessa Jow, the Minister for London, said that it was highly unlikely that Ken will be mayor by the end of the night. As to when we're going to actually get a result, well, at the moment we've only got results from 4 out of 14 of the regions. The rest are still counting or being checked. I'm told they've had the electoral equivalent of a bit of a photocopier crisis at some of the counts, machines overheating, that kind of thing. I spoke to an official just a few seconds ago, and he said it's just possible we'll have a result while it's still Friday.
OK, James, thank you very much. James Landale, who's inside City Hall, monitoring the count for us. Listening to that, with me here, Nick Robinson, our political editor. Nick, if you don't live in London, why should you be at all interested in the result of the London Mayor?
Well, you may be interested simply because if it's true that the man who was such a successful host of Have I Got News For You becomes London Mayor, that'll be extraordinary in its own right. But you ought to care for political reasons. This will be, if it happens, the most significant Tory election victory since 1992. It will be the first senior Tory to have power in Britain since 1992, and it'll be in a highly visible place here in the capital city. And that will mean that voters will be able to look at how the Conservatives handle power, a man chosen by David Cameron, let's be honest, a controversial choice, and they may reach conclusions about a future Tory government as a result of what happens here.
And as for Gordon Brown, Labour MPs starting to say, is this the man we want to have leading us into a general election? Where does all this leave him?
They are saying that, although they know that there's very little they can do about it. In a sense, it was so easy a year ago, wasn't it? When Labour did badly, they had their excuse. Tony Blair had overstayed his welcome. Perhaps people had tired of him. They'd tired of his association with the Iraq War. All the easy excuses gone, and as a result, all the easy answers gone as well. I think there's very little that Labour MPs can do, although I think Gordon Brown will find it much harder to control them now. He believes the explanation is clear, that this is about the economy, economic worries, and the fact that the price of bread is the first time in many years a real feature in a general election. And interestingly here, his allies are now comparing him with John Major, not the Major who lost, the Major who pulled off the stunning victory, the grey man who said to the country, don't risk everything with the untried and untested opposition leader. That will be his message. Today's polls, though, look much more like the Major who went on to lose spectacularly.
OK, Nick, thank you very much. Nick Robinson there. Well, there'll be more from here later in the programme. The full details, by the way, of all the local election results are available for you on the BBC website. Lots of detail there. And our council map gives the national picture. You can search, by the way, with postcode for the results in your area. Just a reminder, bbc.co.uk/elections. More from us in a short while. Back to you, Fiona.
Hugh, thank you.